The massive trading station called Zephyr floated in the dark space between stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went like busy insects around a hive. Merchant vessels carried goods from one side of the galaxy to the other. Diplomatic. Ships brought important messages between governments. Everything moved in the careful dance of galactic commerce that had gone on for thousands of years. Commander Zix stood in the control center, watching the displays that showed every ship in the area. His 6 arms moved across different control panels as he managed the flow of traffic. Zix belonged to a race called the Veltari, and like most of his people, he was tall and thin with gray skin that looked like stone. His large eyes could see many different types of light, which made him perfect for his job of watching space. The day had been normal so far. 3 cargo ships had arrived from the mining worlds. A diplomatic vessel from the Hegemony Council was docked at Port 7. Some traders from the Outer Rim were selling rare metals and crystals. Zix had seen it all before, many times. Then something appeared on his screens that made him freeze. A hyperspace signature was forming near the station. This was normal. Ships jumped out of hyperspace all the time. But this signature was different. It was huge, bigger than anything Zix had ever seen. The energy readings were off the charts. Whatever was coming through was massive. "Alert status yellow," Zix called out to his crew. Around the control room, other aliens looked up from their work. The Zephyr station employed beings from many different worlds, but they all understood that yellow alert meant something unusual was happening. The hyperspace tear opened like a wound in space itself. Energy crackled and sparked around the edges. Then something came through that made every alarm in the station start screaming. It was a ship, but unlike any ship in the known galaxy. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Hegemony battlecruiser. Its hull was a dark gray color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange angular designs covered its surface, and weapon ports dotted its sides like the eyes of some giant predator. But what made Zix's blood turn cold was not just the size of the ship. It was the design. The shape was wrong somehow. Aggressive, in a way that galactic ships never were. Most vessels in their civilization were built for efficiency and beauty. They had smooth curves and elegant lines. This ship looked like it was built for one purpose only: war. "What is that thing?" whispered Kayla, one of the junior controllers. She was from a peaceful water world where conflict was almost unknown. Her blue tentacles trembled as she stared at the display. Zix was already reaching for the emergency communication system. His training told him to contact the Hegemony Council immediately. Ships this large and this heavily armed could only mean trouble. But as he opened the channel, something else happened that stopped him cold. The unknown ship was broadcasting a signal. Not the usual docking request or cargo manifest that commercial vessels sent. This was something else entirely. The computer systems began translating the message, and what came through the speakers made everyone in the control room step back in fear. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration and request permission to dock for diplomatic contact." The words themselves were not frightening. The voice was calm and professional, but the computer had identified the language, and that identification sent waves of panic through the station. It was Terran Standard, the language of Earth, the language of the deathworld. Zix felt his heart beating so fast he thought it might burst. Around him, his crew began backing away from their stations. Some were already reaching for emergency evacuation pods. The name Earth was known throughout the galaxy, but only in whispered stories and ancient warnings. Legend said that Earth was a world so dangerous that no civilized being could survive there. It was a place where the weather could kill you in minutes, where massive predators ruled the land and sea, where even the plants were poisonous. Most scholars believed it was just a myth, a scary story told to children. But here was proof that Earth was real, and its people had built ships. "Sir?" Kayla's voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Zix looked at the massive ship on his screens. It just floated there, waiting. The humans inside probably had no idea that their very existence was the stuff of nightmares to every other race in the galaxy. They probably thought this was just a normal first contact situation. They had no idea that every alien who heard their transmission was now running in terror. "Send an immediate code Crimson Alert to the Hegemony Council," Zix ordered. His voice shook despite his efforts to stay calm. "Tell them the deathworld species has arrived. Tell them Earth is real and they have come to the stars." Around the station, emergency lights began flashing red. Ships that had been peacefully docked suddenly fired up their engines and prepared to flee. Merchant vessels abandoned their cargo and jumped to hyperspace without even asking for clearance. In minutes, the busy trading hub became a ghost station as every alien with any sense ran for their lives. Only the human ship remained, floating peacefully in space, completely unaware of the panic they had caused simply by existing. Aboard the Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the strange reaction of the alien station. He was a tall man with brown hair and steady gray eyes. He had spent years preparing for this moment, humanity's first contact with alien civilization. He had expected many things, but not this. "Captain," said Amy Torres from the communications station. She was a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "I'm getting some very strange readings from that station. It looks like ships are leaving in a hurry." Navigator Lisa Blake looked up from her position. She was blonde and quick with numbers, the best pilot Earth had ever produced. "Sir, I count 15 ships jumping to hyperspace in the last 5 minutes. That's not normal traffic for a station this size." Jake frowned as he watched another ship disappear in a flash of light. "Maybe they're just busy. Keep monitoring their communications. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on." Ryan Carter, the chief engineer, called up from the lower decks. His voice came through the ship's communication system with his usual cheerful tone. "Captain, all systems are running smooth. We're ready for whatever comes next." What Jake didn't know was that whatever comes next would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The peaceful exploration mission he had planned was about to become something much bigger and much more dangerous. As the last alien ships fled into the darkness of space, Jake Morrison and his crew waited for a response to their docking request, completely unaware that they had just announced the arrival of the galaxy's most feared legend. 3 hours after the human ship arrived, the emergency session of the Hegemony Council was in complete chaos. The great chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime had seen many crises over the centuries, but nothing like this. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular room, and all of them were talking at once. Ambassador Krell stood at the center podium, trying to bring order to the meeting. He was a Centauri, one of the oldest and most respected races in the galaxy. His tall, elegant form and silver skin usually commanded respect, but today even his authority was being tested. "Please, honored delegates," Krell called out, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience. "We must approach this situation with calm and reason." "Calm?" shouted Elder Vorth from the military section. The old warrior's red scales were standing up along his neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. "You want us to be calm when the terror species has come to destroy us all?" Around the chamber, other delegates nodded and voiced their agreement. Fear was spreading like a disease through the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and it was all because of a simple message from a human ship. Dr. Hess, the chief scientist of the council, stood up slowly. She was from a world where her people looked like giant insects, but her mind was one of the sharpest in known space. "The data from Zephyr Station confirms our worst fears," she said, her translated voice clicking and buzzing. "The ship matches all the theoretical designs we created based on the old probe data." "Remind us of that data," Krell said, though he already knew what she would say. Every child in the galaxy had heard the stories. Dr. Hess activated a holographic display that showed information collected thousands of years ago. Long ago, when our civilizations were young, we encountered automated probes from a world in the outer spiral arm. These probes carried information about their home planet, a world they called Earth. The hologram showed a blue and green planet that looked almost pretty from space. But as the data continued, the beauty became horror. Earth is classified as a Class 12 deathworld, the highest possible rating. The surface gravity is nearly twice what most of us consider comfortable. The atmosphere contains a highly reactive gas called oxygen that would be toxic to many of our species. But that's just the beginning, Dr. Hess continued. The planet experiences regular climate disasters, ice ages that last for thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that block out the sun, asteroid impacts that destroy entire continents. And somehow, life not only survived these disasters, but grew stronger because of them. The hologram shifted to show the evolution of life on Earth. Massive predators with teeth like knives. Creatures that could run for days without stopping. Plants that could poison or strangle anything that touched them. And at the top of this nightmare food chain, humans. The species that calls itself human evolved as persistence hunters. Dr. Hess explained. They would chase their prey for days, literally running them to death. They developed tools not just for farming, but for war. Their entire history is one long story of conflict, survival, and conquest. Elder Vorth stood up again, his military training making him focus on the practical threats. "Show them the physical data," he demanded. Dr. Hess nodded and brought up biological information about humans. The numbers made several delegates gasp in horror. An average human can lift objects weighing several times their own body weight. They can run for hours without stopping. Their reaction times are faster than most of our elite soldiers, and their endurance... She paused, as if she could barely believe the data herself. They can function for days without sleep, weeks without proper food, and they actually become more dangerous when injured or threatened. "This cannot be real," whispered Ambassador Yell, a representative from one of the peaceful garden worlds. Her people looked like walking flowers and had never known violence of any kind. "Surely these are just stories, myths created to frighten children." "We all hoped so," Krell admitted. "But the ship at Zephyr Station is real. The energy signatures match our theoretical models perfectly. Somehow these creatures not only survived their death world, they developed space travel." The chamber fell silent as the full horror of the situation sank in. For thousands of years, the galaxy had been at peace because no single species was strong enough to dominate all the others. Wars were small and quick, settled by diplomacy rather than force. The idea of a species that was naturally built for war was beyond their worst nightmares. "What do they want?" asked Counselor Reef, whose water-breathing people had never even seen land. "Why have they come?" Dr. Hess checked the communication logs from Zephyr Station. According to their message, they claim to be on a peaceful exploration mission. They want to make contact with other civilizations. Peaceful? Elder Vorth laughed. But there was no humor in the sound. A species bred for war doesn't know the meaning of peace. This is clearly the beginning of an invasion. "We don't know that," Krell argued, though he didn't sound convinced. "Perhaps they truly do come in peace. And perhaps the void between stars will suddenly fill with flowers," Vorth shot back. "These creatures are apex predators from a world that would kill any of us in minutes. They didn't build that ship for exploration. They built it for conquest." Meanwhile, aboard the Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison was growing more confused by the minute. The alien station had finally responded to their docking request, but the message had been strange and frightening. Something about maintaining safe distance and waiting for council guidance. "Amy, are you sure you translated that message correctly?" Jake asked his communications officer. Amy Torres looked up from her station, worry clear on her face. "Yes, sir. They definitely said they were afraid to let us dock, but I can't figure out why. Our message was peaceful. Dr. Karen Phillips, the ship's xenobiologist, was studying the readings from the alien station. She was a small woman with red hair and a brilliant mind that had studied every theory about alien life. "Captain, I'm seeing some very unusual behavior patterns. It looks like almost every ship in the area has fled." "Fled?" Jake walked over to look at her data. "Why would they flee from a peaceful contact?" "I don't know," Karen admitted. "But whatever we said or did, it scared them badly." Navigator Lisa Blake called out from her position. "Captain, I'm tracking ships jumping to hyperspace all across this sector. Word is spreading fast about our arrival." Luke Hayes, the tactical officer, looked up from his weapons console. He was a careful man who always thought about security first. "Sir, should we prepare defensive systems? If they're this scared, they might decide to attack." "No," Jake said firmly. "We came here in peace, and that's how we'll stay. We're not going to be the ones who start a fight." What Captain Morrison didn't understand was that to the aliens watching, his ship, the very fact that humans existed, was more terrifying than any weapon. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is not someone who wants to fight, but someone who is naturally built for it and doesn't even realize how frightening they are to everyone else. As news of the human arrival spread across the galaxy, governments began activating emergency protocols that hadn't been used in centuries. Fleet commanders dusted off ancient war plans. Scientists began calculating how long their species might survive if the deathworld creatures decided to expand their territory. None of them realized that the humans floating peacefully at Zephyr Station were just as confused and worried as they were. The waiting was the hardest part. Captain Jake Morrison had expected first contact with aliens to be many things: exciting, dangerous, historic, but he had never expected it to be boring. For 2 days, the Valiant had sat at the edge of Zephyr, station space, waiting for permission to approach. The only communication had been brief messages asking them to stay where they were. "Captain," Amy Torres called from her communications station. "I'm receiving a transmission from something," called the Hegemony Council. "They want to establish a video communication link." Jake straightened his uniform and ran a hand through his hair. This was it. Humanity's first real conversation with an alien government. "Put it through to the main screen." The display flickered, and then showed a being unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Ambassador Krell was tall and elegant, with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own light. His face was human-like but longer, with large eyes that held an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "Greetings, human vessel," Krell said, his voice coming through the translation system with a slight delay. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Hegemony Council. We welcome you to our space." Jake noticed the pause and the way Krell seemed to choose his words carefully. "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. We're honored to make contact with your civilization." "Yes," Krell said, and Jake was sure he heard nervousness in the alien's voice. "We must ask you some questions. About your intentions." "Of course," Jake replied. "We're here on a peaceful mission of exploration and diplomacy. Earth wants to establish friendly relations with other intelligent species." What Jake didn't know was that on the other end of the transmission, Ambassador Krell was surrounded by military advisors and scientists, all of them studying every detail of the human captain's appearance and behavior. To them, even Jake's friendly smile looked predatory. His teeth, evolved for eating meat, appeared to them like the fangs of a hunting beast. "Captain Morrison," Krell continued, "we would like to learn more about your people. Perhaps you could show us some examples of human culture?" Jake smiled, wider, not realizing that this made the watching aliens even more nervous. "I'd be happy to. Dr. Phillips, would you join me? And perhaps Emma could prepare some cultural materials." Emma Davis, the ship's cultural officer, was a cheerful woman who had spent years studying human art, music, and literature in preparation for first contact. She had always imagined this moment would be a wonderful opportunity to share the best of human civilization. "I have some recordings of human music," Emma said as she appeared on screen next to Jake, "and some examples of our poetry and art." What Emma didn't realize was that human culture, even at its most peaceful, was terrifying to species that had evolved on gentle worlds. The first piece she chose was a simple folk song about overcoming hardship. To human ears, it was beautiful and inspiring. To the aliens listening, it sounded like a war chant about conquest and survival. Dr. Hess, watching from the council chambers, analyzed every word. "Listen to their songs," she whispered to Elder Vorth. "They sing about struggling against nature, about fighting for survival, about never giving up even when facing death. This is not the music of a peaceful species." The situation got worse when Emma showed them examples of human art. She had chosen pieces that showed the beauty of Earth, paintings of mountains and oceans, photographs of forests and wildlife. But to aliens from stable, peaceful worlds, the images looked like scenes from a nightmare planet. "Look at the size of those predators," Elder Vorth muttered as he saw a picture of a lion. "And they live alongside these creatures?" "The mountains are so tall they disappear into the clouds," another delegate observed. "The storms over those oceans could destroy entire cities. How does anything survive on such a world?" But the real shock came when Security Chief Ben Parker appeared on the transmission. Jake had asked him to demonstrate some basic human physical capabilities to show that humans were not aggressive. Ben was a friendly man who had volunteered to show the aliens some simple exercises. He started with basic push-ups, thinking it would demonstrate human fitness in a non-threatening way. What he didn't realize was that his casual display of strength was horrifying to beings from low-gravity worlds. "He's lifting his entire body, weight using only his arms," Dr. Hess reported, her voice shaking, "multiple times without apparent effort." Ben moved on to some simple stretches and a few jumping jacks. To him, it was just a normal warm-up routine. To the watching aliens, it looked like a demonstration of superhuman physical powers. "Captain," Amy Torres whispered urgently, "I'm getting some very strange readings from their transmission. Their stress levels appear to be spiking." Jake looked at the screen where Ambassador Krell was clearly struggling to maintain his composure. "Ambassador, is everything all right?" "Yes, quite fine," Krell lied, though his voice was strained. "We are simply impressed by your physical capabilities." Dr. Karen Phillips, who had been quietly observing the aliens' reactions, began to suspect something was wrong. She was trained to study alien behavior, and everything she was seeing suggested fear rather than friendly interest. "Captain," she said quietly, "I think we might be misunderstanding something here. Their body language suggests they're frightened of us." "Frightened?" Jake was genuinely confused. "But we haven't done anything threatening." What Captain Morrison didn't understand was that to the aliens, everything about humans was threatening. Their strength, their endurance, their history of survival on a death world, even their art and music. All of it painted a picture of a species so dangerous that their very existence was a threat to galactic peace. The communication continued for another hour, with each side trying to understand the other and failing completely. The humans thought they were being friendly and peaceful. The aliens thought they were witnessing a species of living weapons pretending to be civilized. When the transmission finally ended, Jake and his crew were left more confused than ever. "I don't understand," Emma said, looking dejected. "I showed them our most beautiful art and music. I thought it would help them see that we're a peaceful people." "Maybe they just need time to process," Lisa Blake suggested. "First contact is probably just as strange for them as it is for us." But aboard Zephyr Station, and in the council chambers across the galaxy, the aliens were processing what they had seen, and their conclusions were terrifying. The humans had demonstrated physical abilities that exceeded their best soldiers. They had shared cultural works that spoke of endless struggle and conflict, and they had done it all with friendly smiles that looked like predatory grins. Elder Vorth stood before the emergency session of the Hegemony Council and spoke the words that everyone was thinking but afraid to say. They are exactly what the ancient warning said they would be, a species of apex predators that somehow developed intelligence and space travel. They speak of peace, but everything about them screams war. We have three choices: submit to them, flee from them, or try to destroy them before they destroy us. The debate that followed would determine the fate of the galaxy, while the humans who had caused all this fear continued to float peacefully in space, completely unaware that their attempt at friendly first contact had been interpreted as a declaration of dominance. The emergency alert came at the worst possible time. Captain Jake Morrison had finally convinced the Hegemony Council to allow a small diplomatic meeting aboard Zephyr Station. Ambassador Krell had agreed to face-to-face talks, though Jake could tell the alien was still nervous about the whole idea. "Captain," Amy Torres called out from her station, "I'm receiving a distress signal from the Kepler system. Multiple civilian ships under attack by what appears to be a large pirate fleet." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Kepler system was only 2 hours away at maximum speed, but any response would have to wait until after the diplomatic meeting. Lives might be lost because of protocol and politics. "How many ships?" he asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "At least 15. Civilian vessels," Amy reported. "The attackers are identified as the Scar Raiders. They're demanding cargo and passengers." Luke Hayes looked up from his tactical station. As the ship's weapons officer, He understood the situation better than anyone. "Sir, the hegemony peacekeeping force in that area consists of 3 light patrol vessels. They're not equipped to handle a pirate fleet of that size." Jake made the decision that would change everything. "Amy, send a message to Ambassador Krell. Tell him we have to postpone our meeting due to an emergency situation. Luke, plot a course for the Kepler system. Ryan, I need maximum power to the engines." "Aye, Captain," came the responses from around the bridge. What Jake didn't know was that his decision to help the civilians would be seen as something entirely different by the watching aliens. To them, it looked like the humans were abandoning diplomacy to go join a battle. Every alien government with ships in the area had already received reports about the pirate attack, and they were all waiting to see what the deathworld species would do. The Valiant jumped to hyperspace with a speed that impressed even its own crew. Ryan Carter had pushed the engines beyond their normal limits, and the ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like an avenging angel. "Contact!" Lisa Blake called out from the navigation station. "I count 18 ships in attack formation around the civilian convoy. The peacekeeping vessels are trying to hold them off, but they're badly outgunned." Jake could see the battle on the main screen. The pirate ships were dark and ugly, built for fear and intimidation. They surrounded the helpless civilian vessels like wolves around sheep. The 3 hegemony patrol ships were trying their best, but their weapons were designed for policing, not warfare. "Tony, what's our weapons status?" Jake asked his chief weapons officer. Tony Garcia ran through his systems check with professional calm. He was a man who had trained for this moment his entire career, though he had expected to fight other human ships, not aliens. "All systems green, Captain. Kinetic weapons charged and ready. Point defense systems online. We're ready for battle. Remember, we're here to protect the civilians," Jake announced to his crew. "Try to disable the pirate ships if possible. We don't want to start our relationship with the galaxy by killing anyone." What the humans didn't understand was that their idea of trying not to kill anyone was about to look like the most efficient military operation the galaxy had ever seen. The Scar Raiders were not expecting any real opposition. The hegemony, peacekeeping ships were annoying, but not dangerous. When a new ship appeared on their sensors, the pirate captain assumed it was just another patrol vessel. That assumption lasted exactly 30 seconds. The Valiant's first salvo was what humans considered a warning shot. Tony Garcia targeted the weapons systems of the nearest pirate ship with kinetic rounds designed to disable rather than destroy. The projectiles moved at a significant fraction of light speed, powered by magnetic accelerators that could punch through any known armor. The pirate ship simply ceased to exist as a fighting vessel. In one instant, it went from a dangerous raider to a helpless hulk drifting in space. "Direct hit," Tony reported calmly. "Enemy vessel disabled. Aboard the other pirate ships." Panic began to spread. No weapon in the known galaxy could do that kind of damage with a single shot. The Scar captain tried to rally his fleet, but his crews were already talking about retreat. The second exchange made retreat impossible. 3 pirate ships tried to flank the human vessel, firing everything they had. The Valiant's point defense, systems designed to stop Earth-built missiles traveling at incredible speeds, made short work of the alien weapons. Every incoming shot was intercepted and destroyed before it could reach the ship. Then the Valiant returned fire. Tony Garcia was following his captain's orders to disable rather than destroy, but human weapons technology was far beyond anything. The galaxy had seen. What he considered minimal force was devastating to ships built for intimidation rather than real combat. Within 5 minutes, half the pirate fleet was disabled. The other half was trying to flee, but Sarah Wells and her fighter squadron had launched to cut off their escape routes. Sarah was the best pilot Earth had ever produced, trained in three-dimensional combat tactics that took advantage of humanity's natural spatial reasoning abilities. To her, the fleeing pirate ships moved like they were standing still. Tango 1 disabled, she reported, as her fighter's weapons took out another pirate vessel's engines. Tango 2 attempting to flee, but his navigation is compromised. The entire battle lasted less than 15 minutes. When it was over, the Scar Raiders had been completely defeated without the loss of a single human life or civilian vessel. The hegemony peacekeeping ships were undamaged, and the rescued civilians were safe. To Captain Morrison and his crew, it had been a successful rescue mission with minimal casualties. They had saved lives and defeated criminals while barely working, up a sweat. But across the galaxy, the reports of the battle were causing panic on a scale never before seen. Impossible, Elder Vorth muttered as he read the tactical reports. 18 pirate vessels defeated in 15 minutes by a single ship, and they claimed they were trying not to kill anyone. Dr. Hess was analyzing the weapon signatures and energy, readings from the battle. Their kinetic weapons operate on principles we barely understand. The energy output is beyond anything in our databases, and their defensive systems, they intercepted every single incoming projectile. Ambassador Krell sat in stunned silence as he processed what had happened. The humans had said they were peaceful, and in their own minds they probably were. But their idea of a gentle response to pirates had just demonstrated military superiority that made every fleet in the galaxy obsolete. They disabled 18 ships in 15 minutes, he said quietly. Our best military analysts estimate it would take our entire home fleet 3 hours to achieve the same result, and we would lose ships in the process. And they did it while claiming to hold back, Elder Vorth added. What could they do if they were actually trying to destroy something? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every government in the galaxy was now forced to confront a terrible truth. The deathworld species hadn't just survived their impossible planet and developed space travel. They had become so powerful that their idea of restraint exceeded everyone else's idea of maximum force. Aboard the Valiant, Jake Morrison was preparing to return to Zephyr Station for his delayed diplomatic meeting, completely unaware that he had just proven every alien's worst fears about humanity. He thought he had demonstrated human compassion and restraint. What he had actually demonstrated was that humans were so far beyond the rest of the galaxy in terms of military capability that they could afford to be merciful. And to every alien, leader watching, that was the most terrifying thing of all. The diplomatic meeting that finally took place aboard Zephyr Station was unlike anything in galactic history. Ambassador Krell arrived with a security detail of 12 guards, though everyone knew the protection was purely symbolic. If the humans wanted to harm him, no amount of alien security would matter. Captain Jake Morrison came with only Dr. Karen Phillips and Cultural Officer Emma Davis. He wanted to show that humans trusted the aliens and had no hostile intentions. What he didn't realize was that his small escort was being interpreted as supreme confidence in human superiority. The meeting room had been specially prepared with atmosphere controls to accommodate both species. Krell sat across from the humans at a curved table with translation devices ensuring that every word would be understood. The tension in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. "Captain Morrison," Krell began, his voice carefully. "Controlled, we must discuss what happened in the Kepler system." Jake nodded, pleased that the aliens wanted to talk about the rescue mission. "I'm glad we could help those civilians. The Scar Raiders won't be terrorizing anyone for a while." "Yes, Krell said slowly. Your efficiency was remarkable. 18. Ships defeated in 15 minutes with no casualties on your side. We were lucky, Jake replied modestly. Our crew is well trained, and the Valiant is a good ship. But mostly we tried to avoid unnecessary violence. The translation of Jake's words caused several of Krell's advisors to exchange worried glances. The human spoke of destroying an entire pirate fleet, as if it had been a minor inconvenience. His casual attitude toward what the galaxy considered an impossible military victory was more frightening than any threat could have been. Dr. Phillips noticed the alien's body language and decided to try a different approach. Ambassador Krell, we sense that our presence makes you uncomfortable. Have we done something wrong? Krell was quiet for a long moment, trying to decide how much truth to reveal. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. Captain Morris and Dr. Phillips, we must be honest with you. Your species terrifies us. Jake and Karen exchanged surprised looks. Terrifies you? Jake asked. Why? We've done nothing but try to help. That is exactly the problem, Krell replied. You speak of peace, but everything about you suggests war. Your ship is more powerful than our largest battle cruisers. Your physical capabilities exceed our best soldiers. Your cultural works speak of endless conflict and struggle, and you defeated 18 pirate ships while claiming to show restraint. Dr. Phillips began to understand. You're afraid of us because we're from Earth. Earth is classified as a Class 12 deathworld, Krell explained. For thousands of years, we believed it was just a legend, a cautionary tale about what might happen if a species evolved on an impossible planet. But you are proof that the legend is real, Emma Davis spoke up, her voice gentle. Ambassador, what exactly do your records say about Earth? Krell activated a holographic display that showed the data collected by the ancient probes. As the information appeared, the humans began to see themselves through alien eyes for the first time. Your world has a gravity that would crush most of our species, Krell said. Your atmosphere contains a gas that is toxic to many life forms. Your planet regularly experiences disasters that would end civilization on our worlds. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, magnetic pole reversals. But that's just geology, Jake protested. Every planet has natural disasters. Not like yours, Krell replied. And not species that grow stronger because of them. Your evolution was driven by constant struggle. You developed as persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. You created tools not just for survival, but for war. Your entire history is one of conflict, competition, and conquest. Dr. Phillips was beginning to see the bigger picture. You think we're naturally violent because we evolved on a dangerous world. We don't think it, Krell said. We know it. Every aspect of your biology, your psychology, your culture, everything about you is designed for survival and combat. You are apex predators who developed intelligence, and that makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The room fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. Finally, Jake spoke. Ambassador, I understand your concerns, but we're not conquerors. Yes, Earth is a difficult world, and yes, humans have fought wars. But we've also created art, music, literature, philosophy. We've learned to work together to build peaceful societies. That's why we're here, to make friends, not enemies. That may be true, Krell admitted. But consider how your presence has already changed everything. Before you arrived, the galaxy was balanced. No single species was powerful enough to dominate the others. Wars were small and quickly resolved through diplomacy. But now, he gestured to another display that showed military mobilizations across dozens of worlds. Every government is activating emergency protocols. Fleets are being assembled. Defense plans are being updated. Your arrival has destabilized the entire galactic political structure. Because they're afraid of us, Emma said, quietly. Because they know that if you decide to expand your territory, there is nothing any of us could do to stop you, Krell corrected. The battle in the Kepler system proved that. You defeated an entire pirate fleet while claiming to show mercy. What could you do if you actually wanted to destroy something? Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What do you want us to do? Leave? Pretend we never met? That's being debated right now, Krell said. Some want to ask you to return to your own space and never come back. Others want to attack you before you can bring more ships. But there is a third option. Which is? Join us, Krell said simply. Become part of the galactic community. Accept a position of leadership that reflects your actual power. Help us maintain peace through strength rather than balance. Dr. Phillips understood immediately. You want us to become galactic police? We want you to become what you already are, Krell replied. The dominant species. Better that you rule openly and fairly than let fear and uncertainty tear the galaxy apart. Jake looked at his companions, seeing his own confusion reflected in their faces. They had come on a simple exploration mission and somehow found themselves being offered control of galactic civilization. This is a lot to process, he said finally. We'll need to consult with Earth before making any decisions. Of course, Krell agreed. But Captain, you should know that more human ships are already on their way here. Your government announced that the Valiant was just the first of many exploration vessels. Within a year, there could be dozens of human ships in our space. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the fundamental situation was clear. Humanity had accidentally revealed itself to be so far beyond the rest of the galaxy in terms of capability that their very existence had upset the balance of power. The aliens weren't offering partnership, they were offering surrender. As the humans prepared to return to their ship, Krell had one final question. Captain Morrison, may I ask what you consider to be humanity's greatest strength? Jake thought for a moment. Our ability to adapt and survive, I suppose. No matter how bad things get, humans find a way to keep going. Krell nodded sadly. That is exactly what we were afraid you would say. When the humans returned to the Valiant, they found themselves facing a decision that would determine the future of the galaxy. They could try to minimize their presence and hope the aliens would eventually accept them as equals. They could leave and abandon any hope of galactic contact, or they could accept the role that their evolution and technology had thrust upon them. As Captain Morrison looked out at the stars, he realized that humanity's greatest challenge wasn't surviving on a deathworld or building starships. It was learning to live with the fact that sometimes being good at survival made you the thing everyone else feared most. 2 weeks after the diplomatic meeting, Captain Jake Morrison found himself in a position he had never wanted and never trained for. He was sitting in the commander's chair of what the aliens now called the Terran Administrative Center, a hastily converted section of Zephyr Station that had become the unofficial headquarters for human operations in alien space. The changes had happened faster than anyone expected. Within days of the Kepler system battle, alien governments across the galaxy had begun sending representatives to meet with the humans, not to negotiate as equals, but to offer submission in hopes of favorable treatment. Captain, Amy Torres said from her temporary communications post, We have another delegation requesting an audience. This time it's the Altarian Mining Consortium. They want to discuss protection agreements. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. How many does that make today? 14, Amy replied. And it's not even noon. Dr. Phillips looked up from the pile of documents she was reviewing. Each one was a formal surrender or alliance request from various alien governments, corporations, and organizations. Sir, I think we need to face the reality of our situation. Whether we wanted it or not, we've become the de facto rulers of this part of the galaxy. The transformation had been rapid and complete. After news of the Kepler battle spread, alien shipping companies had started requesting human escorts for their cargo vessels. Pirate activity in areas where humans operated had dropped to zero almost overnight. Several minor governments had formally requested to become human protectorates, offering resources and territory in exchange for security guarantees. This isn't what we came here for, Jake said, not for the first time. We're explorers, not conquerors. Emma Davis, who had been studying the cultural implications of their situation, looked up from her tablet. Captain, I've been analyzing the communication patterns from across the galaxy. The aliens aren't seeing us as conquerors either. They're seeing us as, well, the best translation would be inevitable overlords. Meaning they believe human dominance was always going to happen once we reach the stars. They're not angry about it or plotting rebellion. They're just trying to make the transition as smooth as possible. Luke Hayes entered the room carrying a report that made Jake's headache worse. Sir, we've got a problem. 3 more human ships just arrived from Earth. The UES Discovery, the UES Pioneer, and the UES Horizon. Earth Command is calling it reinforcement for the exploration mission. How are the aliens reacting? Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. They're interpreting it as the beginning of the human fleet buildup, Luke replied. Ambassador Krell has formally requested a meeting to discuss territorial assignments and administrative zones. Jake stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the station's docking bays. He could see alien ships arriving constantly, but now they all bore small white flags, the universal symbol of peaceful approach that the galaxy had adopted when dealing with humans. Sir, said a new voice from the doorway. Captain Sarah Mitchell had just arrived aboard the Discovery, and she looked as overwhelmed as Jake felt. I need to speak with you privately. Jake led her to a smaller conference room where they could talk without interruption. Sarah was a veteran commander with 20 years of experience, but she looked shaken by what she had seen on her journey to alien space. Jake, what the hell is going on out here? She asked. Every alien ship we encountered treated us like we were gods or demons. They cleared entire shipping lanes when we approached. Some of them actually sent us tribute. Tribute? Rare. Metals, artwork, scientific data. One ship sent us a cargo hold full of what I think were precious gems, along with a message saying they hoped for favorable consideration in the new order. Jake sank into a chair. How much do you know about the situation here? Earth Command briefed us on the basics. First contact successful, some diplomatic challenges, request for additional ships to support ongoing negotiations. Sarah paused. They didn't mention that we'd accidentally conquered the galaxy. We haven't conquered anything, Jake protested. We just exist. And apparently that's enough. Sarah pulled out a data pad and showed him a star chart. Jake, look at this. It's the shipping routes for this entire sector. See how they've changed? The chart showed something remarkable. Where once the shipping lanes had followed complex patterns determined by political boundaries and economic zones, they now all led to areas where human ships were known to operate. It was as if the entire galactic economy was reorganizing itself around human presence. "They're not waiting for us to tell them what to do," Sarah observed. "They're just assuming we're in charge and acting accordingly." A soft chime indicated that Amy Torres was requesting communication. "Captain Morrison, priority message from Earth Command." Jake activated the communication system. Admiral Rebecca Washington appeared on the screen, her expression serious. "Captain Morrison, I need a full status report. We're receiving some very confusing signals from the aliens." "Admiral, it's complicated," Jake began. "The aliens they're afraid of us. Not just cautious or concerned, genuinely terrified. They think we're some kind of legendary deathworld species." Deathworld species? They classify Earth as uninhabitable by their standards. Our evolution, our history, our entire civilization looks like a nightmare to them. They think we're naturally built for war and conquest. Admiral Washington was quiet for a moment. "Are they right?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake thought about it carefully before answering. "In some ways, maybe. We did evolve as predators. We did survive disasters that would have ended their civilizations. We are better fighters and more adaptable than they are. But that doesn't mean we want to hurt them. What do they want from us?" "They want us to be their leaders," Sarah answered before Jake could speak. "They're offering us control of their governments, their militaries, their resources. They think it's better to surrender willingly than wait for us to take control by force." Admiral Washington looked stunned. "Captain Morrison, I need you to understand something. Earth has no intention of conquering the galaxy. We sent you out, there to make friends, not subjects. I know that, ma'am, but they don't see a difference. To them, any species capable of what we demonstrated is automatically in charge, whether we want to be or not." "What did you demonstrate?" Jake and Sarah took turns explaining the Kepler system battle, the cultural exchanges, and the aliens' interpretation of human capabilities. With each detail, Admiral Washington looked more concerned. "So our attempt at peaceful first contact has been interpreted as a demonstration of dominance?" "Yes, ma'am." "And they're voluntarily submitting to human authority?" "Yes, ma'am." "And if we refuse their submission?" Jake had been dreading this question. "Dr. Phillips thinks it could cause a galactic civil war. Some species want to submit to us, others want to flee to distant parts of the galaxy, and a few are talking about banding together to fight us. If we don't provide clear leadership, the whole galactic civilization could collapse into chaos." "Admiral." Washington rubbed her forehead, clearly feeling the same headache that Jake had been battling. "Captain, I'm going to need time to discuss this with the President and the UN Security Council. In the meantime, try to keep things stable." "How do we do that, Admiral?" "I honestly don't know, Captain. We're in uncharted territory here." After the communication ended, Jake and Sarah sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You know what the really scary part is?" "What?" "I'm starting to think they might be right about us. Not the conquest part, but the rest of it. We are from a death world. We are built for survival and conflict. And maybe that does make us the natural leaders of a galaxy full of species that evolved on gentle planets." Jake didn't want to admit it, but he was starting to think the same thing. The question was, what were they going to do about it? 3 months had passed since the first human ship arrived in alien space, and the galaxy had completely transformed. What the aliens now called the human transition had proceeded with a speed and efficiency that amazed everyone involved. "Captain, Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the main council chamber of Zephyr Station. Now it served as the central coordination hub for what the aliens insisted on calling the Terran Galactic Administration. Maps showing shipping routes, resource allocations, and security zones covered the walls. It looked like the command center of an empire, which Jake supposed it was, even if no human had ever intended to build one. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Ryan Carter said as he approached with a data pad, "the morning reports from the sector commanders." Jake accepted the pad and scrolled through the information. Piracy down 93% in areas with human patrols. Trade volume up 40% along routes protected by human ships. 7 more planetary governments requesting formal protectorate status. 2 minor wars ended when both sides asked for human mediation. "Ryan, do you ever feel like we're living in someone else's dream?" Jake asked. "Every day, sir. But I have to admit, it's not a bad dream. Crime is down, trade is up, and nobody's shooting at anybody else." The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Once the galaxy's various governments realized that humans weren't going to conquer them by force, they had begun competing to offer the best terms for human protection and guidance. The result was a level of galactic cooperation that had never existed before. Dr. Phillips entered the chamber carrying her own collection of reports. "Captain, I've finished analyzing the psychological profiles of our new subjects, allies. I'm still not sure what to call them." "What did you find?" "Something interesting. The species that are adapting best to human leadership are the ones from the most dangerous planets. The Cathera from the high-gravity worlds, the Zephyrians from the volcanic systems. They understand survival pressure and they respect our abilities. And the others? The garden world species are having a harder time. They're not used to the idea that the universe can be dangerous, but even they're starting to see the benefits of human protection." Emma Davis joined them, looking excited about something. "Captain, you need to see this. I've been monitoring cultural developments across the galaxy and something amazing is happening." She activated a holographic display that showed artistic and cultural trends from dozens of worlds. "Look at this. Music is getting more complex and energetic. Literature is exploring themes of adventure and challenge. Architecture is becoming bolder and more ambitious. They're not just accepting human leadership. They're being inspired by human culture." Jake studied the data with mixed feelings. "Is that good or bad?" "I think it's natural," Emma replied. "For thousands of years, their cultures were shaped by the need to avoid conflict and maintain balance. Now they're learning that it's okay to strive for something greater, to take risks, to push boundaries. They're becoming more human," Dr. Phillips observed. "In some ways, yes, but they're still themselves. They're just growing." The conversation was interrupted by Amy Torres's voice over the communication system. "Captain Morrison, priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Washington is requesting immediate contact." Jake made his way to the main communication center, where a full holographic display allowed for realistic conversation across the vast distances of space. Admiral Washington appeared, and Jake could see that she was not alone. Behind her stood President Elena Rodriguez and UN Secretary General Chen Wei. "Captain Morrison," President Rodriguez said, "we need to discuss the situation out there." "Yes, Madam President. What specifically would you like to know?" "Everything," Secretary General Chen replied. "The reports we're receiving sound like science fiction. Alien governments voluntarily surrendering sovereignty, trade routes reorganizing around human preferences, entire species asking for our protection." Jake took a deep breath. "It's all true, sir. The aliens have essentially made us the galactic government, whether we wanted the job or not. And how is this working out? Admiral Washington asked. Better than anyone expected, Jake admitted. Crime is down, trade is up, conflicts are being resolved peacefully. The galaxy is more stable now than it's been in centuries. President Rodriguez leaned forward. Captain, I need you to understand the position this puts Earth in. We're not equipped to govern a galactic civilization. We barely manage our own planet. With respect, Madam President, I don't think we have a choice anymore. The aliens have made their decision. If we try to withdraw now, it could cause chaos. Explain. Dr. Phillips stepped forward. Madam President, the galactic political system was based on balance between roughly equal powers. Our arrival disrupted that balance completely. If we leave, there's no way to restore the old system. The aliens would either fight among themselves to fill the power vacuum, or they'd spend their time preparing for our eventual return. So we're stuck? More than that, Jake said. We're needed. Yesterday, a dispute between two trading federations was settled when both sides asked me to mediate. Last week, a potential war between 3 planetary systems was avoided because all parties trusted human judgment more than their traditional mediators. Secretary General Chen studied the data displays. What are the aliens offering in return for this governance? Everything, Amy Torres answered. Complete access to their technology, unlimited trading rights, territorial concessions, military cooperation. Some species are even offering to relocate their populations if humans want their worlds. They're that afraid of us? They're that convinced that we're naturally superior, Jake corrected. They don't see it as unfair or oppressive. They see it as the natural order of things. President Rodriguez was quiet for several minutes, processing the information. Finally, she spoke. Captain Morrison, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you think they're right? Are we naturally superior to these species? Jake had been dreading this question for weeks. Madam President, in terms of raw survival ability, yes. We're stronger, faster, more adaptable, and more aggressive than any species we've encountered. Our technology is more advanced because we've always had to overcome greater challenges. Our military tactics are more effective because we've been fighting wars for thousands of years. But that doesn't make us better people. It just makes us better survivors. The aliens have created beautiful cultures, amazing art, and peaceful societies. They've achieved things we're still struggling with on Earth. Yet they're willing to let us rule them? They're willing to let us lead them, Dr. Phillips clarified. There's a difference. They don't want to be conquered or oppressed. They want to be guided and protected by beings they see as naturally suited for leadership. Admiral Washington leaned back in her chair. Captain, if Earth decides to accept this role, what would that look like? Jake looked around at his team, all of them dedicated professionals who had never expected to become the administrators of galactic civilization. We'd need more ships, more personnel, and a complete restructuring of how we think about ourselves. We'd also need to be very careful not to abuse the trust these species are placing in us. Any downsides? Several, Jake replied honestly. We'd be responsible for the welfare of billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Any mistake we make could have catastrophic consequences. And there's always the risk that someday someone will challenge our authority. Could we handle that? Luke Hayes spoke up for the first time. Madam President, based on what we've seen of alien military capabilities, any challenge would be over. Very quickly, the real question is whether we want that responsibility. President Rodriguez nodded slowly. Captain Morrison, I need you to maintain the status quo while we debate this on Earth. Don't make any major commitments, but don't do anything that might destabilize the situation. Understood, Madam President. After the communication ended, Jake found himself alone with his thoughts. Through the large windows of the station, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds, all flying small Earth flags alongside their own. He had never wanted to be the ruler of anything, but somehow he had become the de facto leader of galactic civilization. The question now was whether humanity was ready for that responsibility, and whether they could handle it without losing the very qualities that had made them suitable leaders in the first place. 6 months after first contact, Captain Jake Morrison stood before the largest gathering of intelligent beings in galactic history. The Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime had been expanded 3 times to accommodate representatives from over 200 species, all of whom had come to witness what they were calling the formal recognition ceremony. Jake wore his dress uniform, though he felt anything but formal. In a few minutes, he would officially accept humanity's role as the leading species of galactic civilization. It was not a role he had sought, wanted, or felt prepared for, but it was the role that circumstances and alien expectations had thrust upon him. "Captain," Amy Torres whispered from her position beside the podium, "Earth Command confirms that President Rodriguez has signed the authorization. You're cleared to proceed." The decision had taken months of debate on Earth. The UN Security Council had argued for weeks about the implications of accepting galactic leadership. Religious leaders had debated whether humans had the moral authority to govern other species. Scientists had worried about the long-term consequences of disrupting galactic civilization. In the end, the decision had been made for them by events in space. 3 separate crises had required human intervention in the past month. A trade war between manufacturing worlds had been resolved when both sides accepted human mediation. A potential religious conflict had been prevented when human negotiators found a compromise that satisfied all parties. Most importantly, a group of extremist aliens who rejected human authority had tried to restart piracy operations, only to be defeated so quickly and completely that the rest of the galaxy had begged humans to take formal control. "Distinguished representatives," Jake began, his voice carried by translation systems to every corner of the vast hall. 6 months ago, humanity emerged from our home system with the simple goal of meeting our galactic neighbors. We came in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge. He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Some were familiar now. Ambassador Krell, Dr. Hess, even Elder Vorth, who had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after seeing how efficiently humans could end conflicts. What we found was a galaxy full of intelligent, creative, and peaceful species who had built something amazing, a civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect. We also found that our arrival had unintentionally disrupted the balance that made this civilization possible. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The aliens understood better than humans did how drastically their world had changed. Today, we gather to formalize what has already become reality. Humanity will accept the responsibility of galactic leadership, not because we seek power, but because circumstances have made it necessary for the stability and prosperity of all species. Jake activated a holographic display that showed the Terran Accords, the formal agreement that had taken dozens of lawyers, diplomats, and alien representatives months to craft. Under these accords, humanity commits to several fundamental principles. First, the protection of all sentient species and their right to self-determination within their own systems. Second, the maintenance of free trade and peaceful communication between all worlds. Third, the peaceful resolution of conflicts through mediation and negotiation rather than force. What the Accords didn't mention, but everyone understood, was that human military superiority made enforcement of these principles relatively simple. Pirates, warmongers, and other troublemakers had learned that challenging human authority was both futile and unnecessary, since human leadership generally resulted in better conditions for everyone. Fourth, Jake continued, humanity will work to preserve and celebrate the unique cultures and traditions of all galactic species, while promoting cooperation and mutual understanding. This provision had been crucial to gaining the support of species who feared that human leadership would mean human cultural dominance. Instead, the past months had shown that humans were genuinely interested in learning from other species and preserving diversity. In return, the galactic community agrees to recognize human authority in matters of interspecies, conflict, trade regulation, and security. This is not conquest or domination. It is a partnership based on the recognition that some tasks require the unique capabilities that humans possess. Ambassador Krell stood to respond on behalf of the galactic community. The elderly Zentauri had become something like Jake's counterpart in alien government, serving as the primary liaison between human authority and galactic civilization. Captain Morrison, representatives of humanity, 6 months ago we feared your arrival would mean the end of our peaceful galaxy. Instead, we have discovered that your leadership has brought us greater peace and prosperity than we have known in centuries. He activated his own display, showing statistics that even Jake found impressive. Interspecies conflicts down 97%. Trade volume increased by 60%. Piracy and crime reduced to historic lows. Scientific cooperation at unprecedented levels. Cultural exchange programs expanding rapidly. More importantly, Krell continued, humanity has demonstrated something we did not expect. The ability to lead without oppressing, to be strong without being cruel, to maintain order without destroying freedom. The formal ceremony continued for another hour, with representatives from major species offering their own commitments to the new galactic order. But the real celebration began afterward, in the reception halls where humans and aliens mingled freely for the first time. Jake found himself in conversation with Dr. Hess, who had become one of his closest alien advisors. Doctor, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Captain. Are you happy with how things turned out? Really? Deep down, are you comfortable with humans being in charge? Dr. Hess considered the question carefully. Captain, 6 months ago I was terrified of your species. I thought you were monsters from a nightmare world who would enslave or destroy us all. And now? Now I realize that you are indeed from a nightmare world, and you are indeed capable of enslaving or destroying us all. But you choose not to. Every day you choose to use your power to protect rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy. That choice, made freely and consistently, is what makes you worthy leaders. But what if we change? What if future humans aren't as responsible? Then we will deal with that when it happens, Dr. Hess replied. But Captain, you should understand something. Your species' greatest strength is not your physical capabilities or your technology. It is your ability to adapt and grow. If you can survive and thrive on a death world, you can certainly learn to be good galactic citizens. Later that evening, Jake stood alone on the observation deck of the human embassy, looking out at the city lights of Nexus Prime. The capital world of galactic civilization was more beautiful and vibrant than ever, with trade ships arriving constantly and new construction projects reaching toward the sky. "Sir?" Amy Torres found him there, holding a message pad. "Final reports from the ceremony." "How did we do?" "Better than expected. Full ratification by all major species. Formal recognition from 97% of galactic governments. And," she smiled, "congratulations from Earth. President Rodriguez says the whole planet is proud of what we've accomplished." Jake took the pad but didn't read it immediately. "Amy, do you think we did the right thing?" "I think we did the only thing we could do, sir. The galaxy needed leaders, and circumstances made us the logical choice. The question now is whether we can live up to their expectations. And if we can't, then we learn and try to do better. That's what humans do, right? We adapt and survive and keep trying until we get it right." Jake nodded, feeling some of the weight on his shoulders shift. Slightly. He was no longer Captain Morrison of the exploration vessel Valiant. He was now Admiral Morrison, Supreme Commander of Galactic Security and Earth's primary representative to galactic civilization. It was a title he had never wanted and a responsibility he felt unprepared for. But as he looked out at the thriving galactic capital, bustling with activity and cooperation between dozens of species, he realized that maybe being unprepared was okay. Maybe the fact that humans had never wanted to rule the galaxy was exactly what made them suited to do it. The galaxy had found its leaders not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the best person for a job is the one who never wanted it in the first place. And perhaps, Jake thought as he watched ships from 100 worlds moving peacefully through space under the protection of human oversight, that was the most human thing of all, taking responsibility not because it was desired, but because it was needed. In the distance, more ships were arriving from Earth, bringing supplies, personnel, and reinforcements for humanity's newest and most important mission. The age of human galactic leadership had officially begun, and despite all his doubts and concerns, Jake Morrison found himself looking forward to seeing what they could build together.